video, most of you have heard that song before, right? One of my favorite songs, it was one of the first she put out, right? It's one of my favorite songs because it really, it hits to home for me. How I don't get really angry at stuff. I don't have that personality, but I get irritable and things irritate me. And so that video, things that just drive me crazy. Now last week I asked you guys to send me emails of things that drive you crazy, and I'm happy to tell you that all of you are calm and collected through everything in your life because I received nothing. Yeah. Yeah. So as I'm telling you about certain things that drive me crazy, maybe you can commiserate with me. I'm going to give you a small list of things that drive me crazy. When I used to ride a motorcycle, the thing that most drove me crazy was being in the carpool lane and having people come over into the carpool lane when there was not a break. Dennis, does that bother you? See, when you're in a carpool lane and you're allowed to be there as a motorcycle, you feel like you're safe. And you pay more attention when those little breaks come up, because you know people may be coming in and out. But when some jerk comes over when the line is not broken, that's illegal, by the way. You can't go in nor out when that line is not dotted. And so when they come over, most of the time they're not looking. They're trying to get over illegally as quickly as possible. And so you immediately jerk the bike to the left, trying not to get hit. That actually happened the day that I got my last bike. It happened on the way home. So those things, that used to just irk me no end. Solar phone calls. Anybody like those? We'll put you on our list. People calling saying you can get a rebate on solar. Anybody? You get those? We must get, how many we get a week? 6? 3 yesterday, right? Yeah? We have solar all over our roof. There is no place on our roof that's not solarized. And yet they call us. And so Paul just says, we already have solar, will you give us $2,000? And they said, no. And they hang up. Something is wrong with your computer. You guys get those calls? We get those a couple times a week. Paula has this one down. She tells them they're lying and they need Jesus in their life. So she's managed. See, I don't answer the phone when they call my home phone, because if it's you guys, it'll tell me, so-and-so is calling, right? If it calls and doesn't tell me who it is, I'm not picking it up. All right. And I could go on for a long time, because there's a lot of stuff that really irritate me. From politics to blown calls during games. I know that there's no one here that really bothers. But I remember my dad just about kicking in the TV set whenever UCLA Bruins would get a bad call called against them. So it must run in the family. None of you men holler at the TV because there's a bad call. I just about had a heart attack last year when James Rams got into the playoffs because of a bad call. So, yeah, those things just irk me. And it's not that I get angry and lose total control. They irritate me. And I'm not even getting into teens, spouses, pastors, none of that. Because, everybody can be irritated. And it's nothing new. Getting irritated isn't anything new. In fact, plenty of people in the Bible have gotten irritated. And I'll tell you that there are plenty of irritating people in the Bible. You don't have to look any further than the people of Israel as a whole to know that there are irritating people in the Bible. They angered God with their constant griping and complaining. In fact, my dad said that that's the whole reason they got left out of the promised land is because of their griping and complaining. Which is true, because if they just accepted it and went on, that would be faithful and they would be in. And even though Moses spoke out on their behalf on many occasions, the time came when Moses too got fed up. When the Hebrew people griped for water again, God told Moses to speak to the rock. Now, this has happened once before. The people cried out, and God said to strike the rock, and he struck the rock, and water came out. Well, this time, they did it again, and God does not want the same thing to occur. Do you know that we always in the church, we always think that the way that we did it before is going to work again? Did you notice that? And yet God rarely does things exactly the same way. Twice. I know when I was asked to play for some recordings, I said this is going to be very difficult for me because I don't play anything the same way twice.
Amen.
So, that's right. And so it was hard to make myself go back and play the same thing over. But God rarely does that. And so he tells Moses, this time, speak to the rock. Speak to the rock. Well, Moses had had enough of these gripey, complaining teenagers. That's what it was like, having a million teenagers. And all of them griping and complaining about, my clothes aren't washed. No, that's not what they were griping and complaining about. But they were always griping and complaining. And so Moses was fed up, and he took that staff and he whacked that rock. And that kept him from going into the promised land. Now, I've got to tell you, it wasn't Moses' irritation that kept him out of the promised land. God expects us to be irritated by stuff. He knows. He made us human. I can imagine that Jesus got plenty irritated with a bunch of stuff that Peter would say without thinking. God knows that we're going to be irritated by stuff. It's how we respond to that irritation that God is watching out for. And by the way, so is the world. If that guy cuts you off on the freeway, well, let me put it this way. I had a woman in my choir in Moreno Valley. She was going to pick her daughter up from school, and I got to think Moreno Valleys must be very similar to Centennials in that it's very busy around that area and stuff like that. She was trying to get it, and some young men cut her off. She flipped them off. Then they began following her home, and she got very scared. And I said, "Why did you flip them off?" "Well, because they cut me off." Well, okay. The world is looking for your response to irritation. How we respond to stressors is the best measure of our journey toward maturity, or what Jesus terms as perfection. James 1. My brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. Mature, complete, lacking in nothing. That is the biblical word perfection in Greek. So, go back up on the first part of that verse. Sweet. All right. Consider it joy because you know that testing and irritations are testing. Did you know that? We always think it's going to be some big thing. Oh, God's testing me. My child is very sick. Well, yes. But it doesn't have to just be big things. Sometimes it's the little things. And I find in my life sometimes the things that irritate me the most, the garden hose always manages to tweak. Has anybody ever noticed that? When you're pulling it, for some unreal reason, it manages to catch on something that it shouldn't every time you yank on it. Right? Has anybody else had that happen? Okay, say, it's not me. There's a reason that the world penned that phrase, Murphy's Law. It's because it seems to happen all the time. And it's not always the big things that God is using to make us more complete, more mature. Sometimes it's those nagging little things. And if you don't think having a cast on your hand causes some new irritations, I've only had casts on my legs before. I've never had a cast on my hand. And I will tell you, you don't realize how many things are very difficult with one hand. And so, but you face these trials, these little things. And I know everybody has different people in their lives that may be stressors, or different jobs that have stress-related things in them. What do we hear on the way here to work? 80% of all the workforce that quits their job is because they hate their manager. And a really high percentage of people dread going to work. You know, it's stressors. We're all going to have them. I don't care what job you have. I'm pretty sure, Chris, you've got plenty of stressors in the job that you do, right? But someone, Nicole, you do like paperwork and stuff, right? You have plenty of stressors, right? No, but they don't seem as big, right? Absolutely. You're able sometimes to put them into perspective, right? Well, you know, the problem is he has a way worse than mine, thank goodness. You don't think that way, but that's really the way your mind is working it, right? The things that stress me out aren't nearly as important as these other things. But the problem is, in a way they are. Because they're designed to get you to become more mature in your responses. Whatever those stressors are. And he said, let endurance. In other words, you keep going through them, and you keep going through them, and you keep going through them. And you let endurance have its full effect, that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. And you notice that James says, when? He says, whenever you have, not if. If you are alive, you're going to have stressors. Okay? Trials are things that occur in our lives that allow us to grow. Now, if we run away, there are some people that completely run away from these stressors. Does anybody know anybody like that? They immediately, whenever they have a stressor, like these 80% of the people that leave because they have a bad manager. There's a lot of bad managers out there. And you can't always run away from your stressors. But these stressors are put there for your good. And they allow you to grow and respond with a much better attitude. And, maybe before you get to the part where you're responding in a better attitude, that you're responding with better words. So maybe that lady that was on my choir, maybe she's not flipping people off now. She's going, one way! One way! For those of you who don't know, that's a 80s thing, I think. One way. Yeah. Or maybe you're saying, love ya! Or like we do in the South, you say, what is it? Bless your heart. Bless your little heart. Right? You learn how to react better. Now we talked about outside forces that drive us crazy. And one of the things that we will be getting into, that book that we're going to start looking at, and even if you're not coming on Wednesdays, I would highly encourage you to download this book. I know that you can download it for free in Kindle. You can probably do it in iTunes too. It's called The Screwtape Letters. SCREWTAPE. And it is written by C.S. Lewis, who's considered probably the greatest biblical scholar and philosopher of the modern age. How many of you know anything about him other than the Chronicles of Narnia, which he wrote? But it was J.R.R. Tolkien that led C.S. Lewis to Christ. Very interesting, isn't it? But we're going to be looking at that, and this will really help. The whole book he wrote, it's a demon trying to teach his nephew demon how to subvert a man. What skills to use, all of this kind of stuff. And it centers all around this one guy's life, and you see the different attacks that the demon says he should use toward this man. And so it's going to be very enlightening. I think you'll all see some things in the way your spouses act, or the way you act, or different things, or the way you think that they're acting. But we talked about the outside forces. But the worst ones in a church come from within. The things that really cause a commotion are ones that are in the church for us. Because some of them can break out and be very visible to the world. And that was such a problem that you may recall that Paul actually said, you need to quit taking your stuff into the worldly courts. Fix them between yourselves. That's when Christians were suing Christians. That this ought not to happen. But what happens is the world looks at that and goes, man, these people are as messed up as we are. Why would I want any of that? And these things can happen for the most innocuous reasons. One of the things that I've said is a huge double-edged sword is people in the church taking ownership of things. when Cherie, is working on, and Carol, you guys have been working on this tree and different things, they've taken ownership of it. And that's great because you know that it's going to get done, right? We all want to do that. When we do something, especially if there are some of you that are built so that you cannot not do it once you've taken it. You want to see it to completion. But the problem also arises, the flip side of that, is in ownership, there's a temptation to allow that to become personal. So, when we say, you're doing this, and when someone else comes in and maybe does something and tries to help, that irritates us. And they're not doing anything wrong. They're just, maybe they're just doing what happens in their makeup to make their makeup better. But whatever that is, they're coming in and trying to help, and we're like, I was doing this. See that old I. It always comes back to bite us. We want the very best many times. And sometimes we allow our own expectations to affect relationships within the church itself. James 4:1. Those conflicts and disputes among you, where do they come from? Don't they come from your cravings that are at war within you? Ooh, that does not sound good. First of all, I think in most people's vocabulary, when you start using the words craving, that's a negative word, right? Unless you're talking about chocolate, that's different. But for everything else, the whole craving thing, that's not good. And it's at war within you. See, you want something to be done this way, and it didn't get done this way, and so now that irritates me. This probably doesn't apply to any of you out there. But I tell you it can. And it's something we have to be on guard for. Because that's where little things cause cracks in the church, the local church. And so we want stuff to be done well, but it wasn't done the way I want. You know what? It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about us. And I learned a long time ago, and most of you that have come to me and said, I'd like to do this, or I've asked, would you do that? Rarely do you have me telling you how I want you to do it. You know why? First of all, I understand that you're not going to be able to do it the same way I would. That doesn't mean that I could do it better. It just means that you're not going to be able to do it exactly the same way that I would. So, I've already told myself not to have that expectation. And second of all, if I could have done it well, I probably already would have done it. I was going to include this snapshot, and I decided not to include the whole thing, but my favorite comedian talks about early on in his marriage how he went to lay down, and his wife woke him up with the vacuum cleaner in the room. And he said finally she was vacuuming the sheets and my pillow, and he said, "What?" And she said, "The chicken's done." And he said, "Okay." And she says, "You told me when the chicken is done, I'll help you carve it." He said, "I didn't say that." And she said, "Yes, you did." And he said, "Yeah, there's a whole argument there." And then finally he gets up and he goes in to carve that chicken. And he starts on it. She said, "That's not the way that you carve a chicken." And he said somewhere in between the bedroom and the kitchen, she had taken a chicken carving class. But you see how that's irritating? She wanted it done a specific way, probably a way that she had seen how it turns out, which is why I'm never going to try that raspberry stuff that Lori makes, because it would never taste as good as when she makes it. Because I know how it's supposed to turn out. And it doesn't look like I expected. Has anybody had that happen? First time you cooked Thanksgiving. That's not the way Mom used to cook it. Right? I know that when you take something upon you, it's useless for me to tell you how to do it because you are going to do it your way. Now, if somebody else comes in and helps you and does something their way, we need to say, all right, bless their little hearts. They got in, rather than being upset that it got done not my way, we can say, hey, they got in and tried to take care of something. They care about this place. That's why I don't ask y'all, well, how are you going to do this? You know, when David and I were out, we were putting on the lights, right? He's much more perfectionist than I am. I'd stick it up there with a bubble gum if I had to. Whatever. I just want the lights up. But he's very particular. And I'm definitely going to let him do it because he has a specific way that he wants it done. Great. Does everybody here operate that way? Or do we have a lot of micromanagers? Everybody in business knows that term. But in the church, it can be deadly. Even for a pastor. I've seen a pastor that was a micromanager, and it left everyone on staff feeling like they didn't know how to do anything. I've never once came to you, Jane, and said, you should do this in your Bible study. No. We need to come to a place where those things that irritate us, where we respond in the correct manner, especially with one another. There's that old saying, treat your family like guests and your guests like family. And sometimes, especially in a small church like this, it's kind of, I would call it semi-country, we think that we can say anything to anyone. That's not the way it's supposed to happen. It's just not. We need to respond to each other always in love. And the moment we get irritated about anything, we should think, the first question should be, why am I irritated? Something got done. Why does that irritate me? And if it's, I can almost guarantee it's almost always going to be a reason that was unworthy of us flashing out at someone. God expects us to mature. God has given us every opportunity and every skill that we need to mature. And part of that process is how we respond to stresses. Let's bow our heads.